She was sent to wed the heir of Morwen, and arrived to find him 3 days buried. The rider who met them on the road wore black, and Joan understood, before he had said a word, that something had gone wrong. He had come down the track from the keep at a pace that was not the pace of a man bringing welcome. He drew his horse up alongside her father's, and he took off his cap, and he said, "Sir Edmund, my lord sends word. I am to bring you in by the side gate. The lady is not to come into the yard." "Why?" The rider looked at Joan once, and then back at her father. "My lord's elder son is dead, Sir Edmund, 3 days. The fever that took the old steward last month. The household is in mourning. The hall is hung. My lord asks that the lady be brought in quietly to the steward's chamber, and that you be brought to him in the solar, and that the rest be spoken of when the lady is rested." Joan's father did not speak for a moment. "Roland is dead. 3 days, sir. And the marriage?" "My lord did not say, sir. He said only what I have said." Her father turned to her. He was a big grey-haired man who had been a knight in his youth, and was a landed man with a small holding in the Welsh marches now, and his face was the face of a man who had ridden 3 days west to deliver his only daughter to a wedding that was no longer a wedding, and who did not, in the moment, know what to do with this. "Joan, I heard him, Papa. We will go in. We will hear what he has to say. We will not," he stopped. He did not finish. "We will not what? We will not decide anything tonight. You will rest. I will speak with him. We will know in the morning." She nodded. She did not, then, trust her voice for more than that. They came into Morwen Keep by the side gate, as the rider had said. The yard, when Joan looked into it through the arch, was hung with black cloth from the gate to the great hall door, and there were perhaps 20 men of the household standing in it bareheaded, and a priest at the foot of the steps to the hall, and a woman in black at the priest's elbow. Joan saw all of this in the few seconds it took the rider to lead her around the side wall to the steward's chamber door, and then the wall was between her and the yard, and she did not see the rest. The steward's chamber was a small ground-floor room with a single window onto the kitchen garden. A woman of perhaps 50 in a grey dress was waiting in it. She curtsied when Joan came in. She said her name was Aldith, and that she had been instructed to attend the lady until other arrangements could be made. "Have you eaten today, my lady?" "I have not." "I will bring you food. The kitchen is in a state, but the bread is good. Sit by the fire. Your father will come to you when he can." Joan sat. Aldith went out. The door closed behind her. Joan was 19 years old. She had not, in her life, met the man she had been sent to marry. The arrangement had been made between her father and the Lord of Morwen the previous spring, in the way these arrangements were always made, with a portion of land that ran with the marches settled on her in return for the alliance. She had been told the heir's name was Roland, and that he was 26, and that he had served in the king's wars in Brittany, and was, by every account her father had been able to gather, a competent man and not a cruel one. She had been told there was a younger brother, who was a different kind of man, quieter, less suited to the keep, who had been intended for the church before the elder brother had begun to think about marriage, and who would now, presumably, take orders in due course. She had not been told the younger brother's name. She had not, on the long ride west, thought of the younger brother once. She sat by the fire in the steward's chamber, and she thought about Roland, whom she had not met and would now never meet, and she thought about herself, sitting in the steward's chamber of a keep she had been sent to be the lady of, and was now in mourning gear that had been put on her at her father's instruction at the last inn before Morwen, because the rider had brought word, and her father had thought it the kinder thing. She thought about her father, who had ridden 3 days for nothing. She thought about the woman in black she had seen at the foot of the hall steps, and wondered whether that had been Roland's mother, and whether his mother knew, yet, that the bride had come. Aldith came back with a tray, bread, cold meat, a cup of warmed wine. Joan ate a little. She had not, in honesty, been hungry on any of the 3 days of the ride west, and she was not hungry now. "My lady." "Yes, Aldith." "My lord asks if you will come up to the solar at the hour of 7 this evening. He asks that your father bring you. He asks that you not come into the hall on the way. The hall it is not a place for the lady tonight. Where shall I be lodged?" "In the chamber that was prepared for you, my lady, above the solar. It is the chamber of the lady of the house. Lady Marjorie, my lord's wife, has died 8 years ago, and the chamber has not been used. It was prepared for you a fortnight before you came." Is Lady Marjorie the woman I saw in black at the steps? No, my lady. That was Sir Roland's nurse, who is my own elder sister. She raised both the young lords from infants. She is the one most undone by it. The household has gone gently with her these 3 days. Joan was quiet a moment, and the younger brother, Aldith, looked at her. My lord Alaric, my lady. He is in the solar with my lord his father at the moment. He has been with him all day. He will be there when you come up. What is he like, Aldith? The older woman set the tray down on the small table by the fire. He is 23, my lady. He has been a quiet boy and is a quiet man. He has read more books than any other man in this keep, including the priest. He was meant for the church and would have done well at it. He has not, in the 3 days since his brother died, slept that anyone has seen. He has been at his father's side, and he has done the things that need doing when a death has happened in a great house in the middle of arrangements like yours. And he has done them, my lady, with more steadiness than anyone in this place expected of him. You did not expect it of him. I did not, my lady. I have known him since he was 3 years old. I would have said a week ago that he could not have done the half of what he has done these 3 days. I would have been wrong. Joan thought about this. Aldith. Yes, my lady. What is my lord likely to ask me tonight? Aldith looked at her with a steadiness Joan was not accustomed to from servants. The older woman had the look of a person who was deciding whether to speak, and was, in that moment, deciding she would. My lady, I think my lord will ask whether you will marry the younger brother in his elder brother's place. I think he will ask it tonight because he is 62, and his health is not what it was. And the alliance with your father's land is one his house has needed since before Sir Roland's death. And he cannot, in the time he has left, find another arrangement. I think he will ask it badly because he is a grieving man, and he was closer to his elder son than he ever knew how to be to the younger. I think Sir Alaric will not have been told before you come into the solar that the question is to be asked. I think it will be asked of all 3 of you at once. That is what I think, my lady. I am telling you so that you will not be ambushed. Joan was quiet. Thank you, Aldith. I have not said it. I have said nothing. Eat your bread, my lady. There is an hour. She went out. Joan ate the bread. She finished the wine. She sat by the fire and she thought. Her father came in at 6:30. He had washed and changed out of his riding clothes. He sat down opposite her by the fire and he said, Joan, he has not yet spoken to me. He has been with his son. We are to go up to the solar at 7. Aldith told me. Papa. Yes. Aldith thinks he is going to ask whether I will marry the younger brother. Her father was silent for some time. That had not occurred to me. It should have. The alliance, yes. Joan, listen. I will not be made to give my word for you tonight. If he asks the thing, I will say we must consider. I will say a fortnight at least. We will come away. We will think. We are not in a position where we must answer tonight. Papa, what is the younger brother? I know nothing of him. I asked once last spring. The old lord said he was a scholar and was for the church. That was all I was told. I did not ask further because the marriage was to Roland. Aldith says he has not slept in 3 days. Aldith has talked a great deal to you in an hour. Aldith is the only person in this keep who has spoken plainly to me since I came in by the side gate, Papa. I will be grateful to her for it as long as I live. Her father looked at her. He nodded slowly. All right. Yes. Aldith, we will go up at 7. They went up at 7. The solar was a long upper room with a great fireplace at one end and a single tall window at the other, and it had been hung, like the hall below, with black cloth at the window and the chair backs. 2 men were in the room. The Lord of Morwen. Joan recognized him from her father's description. A tall, heavy, grey-bearded man of 62, in dark mourning over a worn dark tunic, was standing at the window. The younger man was in a chair near the fire. The younger man stood when they came in. Joan looked at him. He was perhaps her own height, slightly taller. He was thin in a way that suggested he had been thin all his life, and not only in the 3 days since his brother's death. His hair was dark, and had been cut recently, and not very evenly, as though by his own hand. He was wearing a plain dark tunic without ornament. He had grey eyes that were red-rimmed from no sleep. He was not, by any conventional measure, a handsome man. He had the kind of face that a careful observer might decide, after some weeks of looking at it, was an honest face, but no one would call handsome on the first evening. He did not, When she came in, make any of the bows or the courtesies a young man at a great house is supposed to make to a lady arriving. He stood only, and he looked at her, and he looked at her father, and then he looked at his own father at the window, and the look at his father was the look of a man waiting to be told what was expected of him. "Sir Edmund," said the old lord. He did not turn from the window. "Lady Joan, sit." They sat. Joan in the chair Aldith had set for her, her father in the chair beside it. The younger brother, after a moment, sat down again in his own chair near the fire. The old lord did not sit. He stood at the window with his back to the room, and he spoke without turning. "My son Roland is buried in the chapel of this keep 3 days. He died of the fever the old steward had. I have buried 2 sons before him in their childhoods and a wife 8 years ago, and I had thought I was done with the burying. I was wrong. I will not waste your time, Sir Edmund, or your daughters, with preamble. The alliance with your land is one this house needs. Roland is dead. I have 1 son left. I am asking before this night ends whether your daughter will marry him in his brother's place, on the terms we agreed in the spring, with the lands settled as we agreed, with the wedding to be held 3 months from today when the household is out of mourning. I am asking you to give me an answer in this room, this evening. I know it is not the way these things are done. I know I am asking out of order. I will tell you why I ask. I am 62, and my doctor has told me I will not see another winter. I cannot give your daughter and Alaric a year to know each other. I do not have a year. I have a few months, and I want my house settled before I die. That is what I am asking. That is why I am asking it tonight." He stopped. He did not turn from the window. Joan's father did not, for some seconds, speak. He looked across the small distance between his chair and Joan's, and he met her eye, and she could see that he was about to say what they had agreed in the steward's chamber, that they would consider, that a fortnight at least, that they were not in a position where they must answer. She put her hand on his sleeve. She did not, then, know why she did it. She had not, walking up to the solar, decided anything. She had walked up expecting to leave the room without having committed to anything, the way her father had said. But the old man at the window had spoken about burying his sons and his wife, and the younger brother in the chair by the fire had not, in any of the speech, looked anywhere but at his own hands, and something in Joan that she had not known was in her had decided, without consulting the rest of her, that she would not leave the room without saying something true. "My lord." The old man at the window turned. "My lady, my father will speak for the contract. The contract is his to speak for. But I will speak to your son, if he will permit me, before any word is given by my father or by yours. I will speak to him in this room in the presence of you both for 1/4 of an hour. After that, I will be able to say what I think, and my father will be able to say what he thinks, and the 2 thinkings together will, I hope, be what you have asked for." The old lord looked at her. He looked at her for what felt like a long time. "That is fair," he said. "It is more fair than I deserve to be met with. Alaric." The younger brother looked up. "Speak with the lady." "Father, speak with her, Alaric. She has asked you a courtesy. Give it her." Joan's father stood. The old lord crossed the room and took her father by the elbow, and the 2 older men went out of the solar together and closed the door behind them. Joan and the younger brother were alone in the room. He did not, for some seconds, speak. He had stood when his father had gone out. He stood now by his chair with his hands at his sides, and he looked at her, and the look was not the look of a man trying to charm a stranger. It was the look of a man who had been awake for 3 days and was being asked, without warning, to do a thing he had not thought he would ever have to do. "My lady." "Sit, Sir Alaric. I am not going to interview you standing. I am tired, and you are tired, and we should both sit." He sat. He looked at his hands again. After a moment he said, "I am sorry for the way you have been received. I am sorry that you have come 3 days and have been brought in by a side gate. I am sorry that my father has put the question to you the way he has put it. I would not have had it done this way." "How would you have had it done?" "I would have had you given a fortnight to grieve a man you did not know but had been promised to. I would have had you told properly what the situation was by someone with the time to tell it properly. I would have had—" He stopped. "I would have had you not asked at all. Perhaps, I do not know. I am not the right man to be asked. I know this. My father knows it too and is asking anyway because he is dying and because he loves this house more than he loves either of his sons, and I am sorry, my lady. I am sorry that you are in this room with me and not with my brother. She looked at him. Sir Alaric. Yes. What did you intend to be before 3 days ago? He looked up. The question seemed to have caught him sideways. A clerk, he said. In the diocese of Hereford, I have a place arranged. I was to go after the wedding, after Roland was settled. I would have come back for feasts and for the harvest. I would have been a clerk and then perhaps in time a priest. I had not yet decided whether to take orders. I would have decided in a year or two. I am, a poor fit for the keep. I am a worse fit, my lady, than my father is permitting himself to remember tonight. Why do you say so? He thought, because I have not, in my life, given an order to a man-at-arms that he did not pause before obeying. Because I cannot read a steward's accounts without my brother's hand at the bottom of the page to tell me whether the steward is honest. Because I do not know which of my father's tenants is which without asking the priest. Because I have spent the years, I should have spent learning these things instead in the small library on the upper floor of this keep, which has perhaps 200 books in it, which my mother brought with her when she married my father, and which is the place in this keep that has been mine. I have been a good son to a small library, my lady, and not, I think, a useful son to a great house. My father is asking you to marry the man my brother was in my body. I cannot be that man. I will be honest with you in this quarter of an hour, because I will not have you marry me without knowing it. I cannot be Roland. If you say yes tonight, you will be saying yes to the man I am, who is the man in this chair, and you will be saying yes to a keep that is going to be much harder to hold without my brother in it than my father is admitting it will be. He stopped. Forgive me, my lady. I have not slept, and I am speaking more plainly than I ought. You are speaking exactly as plainly as you ought, Sir Alaric. Do not stop on my account. He looked at her. What would you have me say further? Tell me about your brother. He was quiet for some time. He was 4 years older than I am. He went away to be fostered with my uncle when he was 7 and I was 3, and he came back when he was 13 and I was 9, and from the age of 9 I had a brother who knew things I did not, and who was patient with me mostly about not knowing them. He taught me to ride. He taught me to use a sword badly, because I was a bad pupil, and not because he was a bad teacher. He read the books with me when we were younger and laughed at me when I quoted them at table, and pretended to my father that the quoting was his fault rather than mine, because he knew my father liked him better than me and could afford to take the blame. He went to Brittany at 21 and came back at 24, a man I did not quite know, in the way men who have been to wars come back. He was kind to me anyway. He would have made a better lord of this keep than my father has been, and my father has been a good lord. He would have made you a good husband. I am sorry, my lady, that he is not here to be one. Joan looked at her hands. Sir Alaric. Yes, you loved your brother. I did, and you have not slept in 3 days because of it. I have not. You did not come down to the side gate to meet me because you could not, in honesty, have stood at the gate today. You sent the rider because you could not have come yourself. He looked at her. His face had not, until that moment, shown her anything she could name. It showed her, briefly, the thing that had been in it. How did you know? Because Aldith told me you had been with your father all day. A man with his father all day is not at a gate. I worked out the rest, Sir Alaric. I am tired, but I am not stupid. You did not send the rider because you wished to slight me. You sent the rider because you could not yet face the thing he was riding to bring you. That is true. I am sorry, my lady. Do not apologize. It is the most useful thing I have learned about you in 5 minutes of conversation. He almost smiled. He did not. But the almost was there, briefly, in the corner of his mouth, and Joan saw it and thought that the man in the chair was not, perhaps, the man he had spent the 5 minutes describing himself as being. Or perhaps he was that man and was also the man who almost smiled. Both could be true. Both probably were. Sir Alaric. Yes. Will you tell me one thing more? Anything you wish. If I say yes tonight, what will you do tomorrow? He looked at her. I do not understand the question. I do. I will explain it. I have ridden 3 days to marry a man I did not know. I am prepared to do that. It is what daughters of houses like mine do, and I am not unprepared for it. But you are not a man I did not know now. You are a man I have known for 5 minutes, who has spoken to me more plainly in 5 minutes than my father's house has spoken to me in 19 years. I would like to know what you will do tomorrow if my father gives his word, and your father gives his word, and the thing is set. Will you take me out of the side gate and ride me back to my father's house? Will you sit in your library upstairs and not come down? Will you go to the diocese of Hereford anyway and leave me here with your father and his 62 years and his winter coming on? What will you do, Sir Alaric? He looked at her. I will, tomorrow, sit with the steward and ask him to teach me the accounts. I will, tomorrow, ride out with my father's man-at-arms to the eastern tenants and ask him to tell me who is which. I will, tomorrow, write to the diocese of Hereford and tell them I am not coming. I will, tomorrow, go to my brother's grave in the chapel and tell him what has happened and ask him to forgive me for taking what was his. I will, the day after tomorrow, ask you to walk out with me on the south wall and tell me how the keep looks to a stranger, because you have been a stranger in it for one evening and will not be a stranger in it long, and I will need to know what a stranger sees before I lose the use of the seeing. That is what I will do, my lady. That is what I will do tomorrow and the day after. I do not know what I will do in a year. I do not know whether I will be a good husband to you or a good lord to this house. I do not know whether you and I will, in 5 years, have anything more than the courtesy of strangers who have shared a roof. But I will do those things tomorrow and the day after, and we will see what we have built by the time my father dies, and we will, between us, hold the house if we can. Joan looked at him. She did not, for some seconds, trust her voice. That is a better answer than I expected. It is the only answer I have, my lady. I am sorry it is not a more romantic one. Sir Alaric, I have ridden 3 days to marry a man I did not know. I am not, in this moment, in the market for romance. I am in the market for a man who will, tomorrow, sit with the steward and ride to the eastern tenants and write to Hereford. You have offered me that man. I accept him. He looked at her. You are sure, my lady? I am sure. Call your father. Call mine. He stood. He went to the door. He opened it. The 2 older men were in the passage outside, not speaking, the old lord with his hand against the wall and her father a few paces off, looking out a slit window into the yard. They came in. Father. Yes, Alaric. Lady has done me the honour. We are agreed. The old lord looked at Joan. He looked at his son. He did not speak for some seconds. Sir Edmund. My lord. Your daughter has, in a quarter of an hour, taken a question I have lived with for 3 days and given it an answer I did not believe was available. I am in her debt. I am in yours. I will see that the contract is drawn tomorrow with the terms we agreed in the spring, with the only change being the name of the groom. If your daughter is content with this, I am content. I am content, my lord, said Joan, before her father could answer. Her father looked at her. He nodded slowly. He said, Then we are agreed. That was the betrothal. The 3 months of mourning passed. Joan stayed at Morwen for the first fortnight to allow herself and Alaric to begin the work he had named, and then she went home with her father for a month, and then she came back to Morwen for the last 6 weeks before the wedding. And in that last 6 weeks the 2 of them did the things he had said he would do, and she did the things she had not promised, but did anyway. She went over the keep with Aldith and learned the household. She sat with the old lord in the evenings, and listened to him talk about the keep and his sons and his dead wife. She rode out with the priest who knew the country and learned the tenants by name. The wedding was small. The old lord was too unwell to stand long at it. The hall had been unhung of its black cloth a week before. The priest who had stood at the foot of the steps the evening Joan had arrived in mourning gear was the priest who married them. Aldith stood at the back of the chapel with her sister, who was Alaric's old nurse, and the nurse wept openly through the ceremony and did not, afterward, apologize for it, because she had been the only person in the keep who had loved both brothers since they were 3 years old, and the loving of both at once required the weeping. The old lord lived through Christmas and died in the first week of February, in his bed, with Alaric on one side of him and Joan on the other, and the priest at the foot of the bed. He died quietly. He had been, in the last weeks, less hard than he had been all his life, and Joan had come to be fond of him in a way she had not expected when she had first looked at him, standing at the window of the solar with his back to the room. She had thought then that he was a hard man who had used his grief as a weapon. She thought, by his death, that he had been a man who had not known how else to ask, and who had asked the only way he had been able to ask, and who had loved his keep more than he had known how to love his sons, and had, in his last winter, begun to know it. Alaric became Lord of Morwen at 23. He did the things he had said he would do, and he did the things he had not said. He sat with the steward every morning of the first 6 months and learned the accounts. He rode the bounds of the keep with the priest until he knew every wall and every tenant. He wrote to Hereford, and they wrote back, with regret and good wishes, and the place was given to another young man. He did not, in the first year, do any of these things with grace. He did them with the awkwardness of a man who had been formed for one life and was learning another, and the household watched him do them, and was, by the end of the first year, no longer waiting for him to fail. He was not, in the first year, a husband to Joan in every sense. He came to her chamber on the wedding night, and they spoke until the dawn, and he slept in the chair by her fire, and went back to his own room before the household woke. He came to her chamber on perhaps a dozen other nights of the first year in the same way, to talk, to sit, to be in the room with the only other person in the keep who was, in those months, doing what he was doing. He was, by the end of the first year, in love with her, and she with him, and they both knew it, and neither of them said it, because the saying of it had not yet found its hour. The hour came in the summer of the second year, when Joan was 21, and Alaric was 25, on an evening when she had been out riding alone in the east meadow, and had been thrown by her mare into a hedge, and had walked back to the keep with a torn dress, and a cut across her cheek, and a temper she could not quite get hold of. And Alaric had been at the gate when she came in, and had taken one look at her face and laughed, actually laughed, briefly, for the first time since his brother had died, and had walked her into the hall and sat her down, and cleaned the cut himself with a cloth Aldith had brought him, and had said, while he was cleaning it, "Joan, I am going to say something I have been not saying for a year. I am going to say it now, because if I do not say it while you are angry at the mare I will lose my courage again, and I have lost it every other time. I love you. I have loved you since the night you told me my answer was a better one than you had expected. I do not know whether I am the husband you would have chosen if you had been given a choice that was not me or my brother. I do know that I am, in honesty, your husband, and I would like, if it is acceptable to you, to be your husband in every sense the word can carry." Joan had looked at him. The cloth had been against her cheek. Her dress had been torn at the shoulder. She had been about to cry from anger, and was now about to cry from a different thing. "Alaric, yes, you have very poor timing. I know. I am bleeding. I know. You will have to put the cloth down first." "I will." He had put the cloth down. He had kissed her in the hall of Morwen in front of Aldith, who was standing in the doorway with a basin of water, and who had set the basin down very quietly on the side table, and walked back to the kitchen without being told to, because Aldith had been waiting 2 years for this moment, and was not going to be the one who stood in its way. They had 3 children. Their elder son was named Roland. Their daughter was named Marjorie, for Alaric's mother. Their younger son was named Edmund, for Joan's father. The keep, under Alaric, prospered as it had not prospered under his father, slowly, in the careful way a keep prospers when the man at its head has read every book in his mother's library and has applied the reading, late, to the work of holding the land, and the country round Morwen, which had not, in the old lord's last years, thought much of the younger son, came in time to think of him as the better lord of the 2 his father had raised, though no one in the country had ever said so to him, because he would not, by his nature, have known what to do with the saying. Joan, when she was old, used to say that the best thing that had ever happened to her was a fever in Brittany she had not witnessed, and a rider in black coming down a track to meet her on the road, and she would say it in the hearing of her grandchildren without explaining what she meant, because the explanation was a long one, and she was not, in her old age, in the habit of telling long stories without being asked. She was asked, in time, by her eldest granddaughter, who was 16 and was being sent the next month to be married to a man in the north she had not met. Joan told her the story then. The granddaughter listened. When Joan had finished, the granddaughter said, "Grandmother, what if the brother had been worse than the one you were sent for, and not better?" Joan thought a moment. "Then I would have come home with my father, child. The story turned on 5 minutes in a solar. It could have turned the other way. The lesson is not that the younger brother is always the better man. The lesson is that you must, when you arrive at a strange keep, ask for a quarter of an hour in a room. You must ask, and you must use the quarter of an hour to find out what is true. If what is true is not bearable, you must come home. If what is true is bearable, you must say so. That is the lesson, child. The marrying is what comes after. The quarter of an hour in the room is the thing. The granddaughter went north the next month. She married the man she had been sent to. The marriage was, by the granddaughter's later account, a tolerable one. She had asked on her first evening for a quarter of an hour in a room. The man had given it. He had not been Alaric, and he had not been Roland, and he had not been the worse than Roland Joan had described as the case for coming home. He had been a man, and he had answered her questions, and she had decided, in the quarter of an hour, that he was bearable, and she had said so, and they had built what they had built. Joan died at 68 in her own bed at Morwen, with Alaric at her side, who outlived her by 4 years, and was buried beside her in the chapel where his brother had been buried before either of them was married. The tomb of Roland is on the southern wall of the chapel. The tomb of Alaric and Joan is opposite it, on the northern wall. The two tombs face each other across the chapel floor, and the priest who is at Morwen now, who is the great-grandson of the priest who married Alaric and Joan, sometimes tells visitors that the brothers face each other across the chapel because the younger one has, in death as in life, never quite stopped looking across at his elder and asking forgiveness for taking what was his. It is a good story, and the priest tells it well, but it is not, strictly, the truth. The truth, by what Joan said to her granddaughter the year before she died, is that Alaric stopped asking forgiveness of his brother in the 2nd year of his marriage. On the evening, Joan had been thrown into the hedge, and he had cleaned the cut on her cheek, and had said the thing he had been not saying. He had gone, that same night, into the chapel, and he had stood at his brother's tomb, and he had said aloud that he had taken what had been Roland's, and that he was not, any longer, going to apologize for it, because Roland would not have wanted him to apologize for being happy in the life Roland had not been given. He had gone back to the keep. He had not stood at his brother's tomb again, in that posture, in the 40 years that followed. The tombs face each other in the chapel because the chapel is a small chapel and there is nowhere else for them to face. The story is the priest's. The truth is Joan's, who told it to her granddaughter, who told it to her own daughter, who told it to me when she was an old woman, and I was a young one who had ridden 3 days east to be married to a man I had not met. She told it to me on the evening before I rode the last day to his keep, in the inn at the last village on the road, while I was wearing the clean linen she had insisted on washing for me. She told it to me, and she told me to ask, on my first evening at his keep, for a quarter of an hour in a room. I asked. I used it. I am writing this many years later at the desk in the upper solar of a keep that is not Morwen, with my husband downstairs in the hall and my children in the yard, and the lesson is what Joan said the lesson was. It is not that the younger brother is always the better man. It is that you must, when you arrive at a strange keep, ask for a quarter of an hour in a room.